Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session on reframing motherhood, thriving after maternity leave. I want to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather for today's event. It's a traditional thing we do in Australia whenever we start any session or ceremony or event to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, which is the Indigenous people. And I'm currently on the traditional land of the Naruk Willam clan of the Boon Wurrung people, who are part of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and emerging. Now, before we begin, a few housekeeping rules. This session is being recorded, and I would request everyone to put their phones on silent and feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and we'll get to them once the session is completed. So I'll go through all the questions and then I'll moderate and ask Alice those questions. And if time permits, and if you still have more questions, then feel free to ask. All right, let's begin. My name is Tribly Dsouza. I am the founder of Nino Mondo. Nino Mondo is a support platform for mothers juggling new motherhood and balancing career and well-being, especially in the early years of being a new mother. And I'm excited to welcome our guest today, Alice Darbyshire. Alice is an executive coach. She's a leadership mentor and one of the few people who speaks about the real truth of returning to work, not just with strategy, but with soul. And she herself has two kids and she understands the challenges of returning to work after becoming a mother. She has two kids, so she knows it both the times. And she has worked with many organizations to work to create parenting friendly policies and employment opportunities for women to continue their work after becoming a mother. So, Alice, thank you so much for being here today. We are really excited to offer this experience to a community of mothers.
Thank you, Tribly, and hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here and for showing up because we all know the juggle. I was just sharing with Tribly before we came on that it's 8:30 in the morning. I'm in the UK and my kids are off to camp and it was chaos. So I might look calm now, but about 10 minutes ago, it was not calm in my house. Um, and I know that returning to work after maternity can also feel like a huge roller coaster. And But I also believe it can be a powerful moment for us all. So I'm really excited just to explore all of that and to be here with you all today. So thank you for having me, Triply, here.
Thank you. We are lucky to have you, Alice. So today's session isn't a typical motherhood or HR webinar. This is for real mothers who have had little children not so distant past and they've come back to work or are thinking of going back to work. So what this session is going to focus on is truthfully looking at what it feels like to come back to work after having a baby, because it is not the same. And what can that shift look like to make that return to work feel less like survival and more like growth? So I'll ask you some questions and then we can go from there. Are you ready?
Yeah, great.
All right. So Alice, you worked with many mothers, many organizations, and you yourself are a mother.
Mhm.
So help us understand, in your experience, why does returning to work feel like such an emotional roller coaster for women between who they were before and who they are now?
So I think this is a great question because I think the reality is that it feels like an emotional collision because it is an emotional collision, like, period. I think it's very common before we go on our maternity leave for work and our career really to be a huge part of our identity. It's kind of who we are, central to who we are, actually. It's a signal of our capability. It provides us the purpose. We get recognized in that role and so on and so forth. And then as we become mums, our sense of personal self actually expands vastly. As we've got this other really, really important purpose, this dependent being that becomes central to who we are. And I think that parenthood almost like forces us to see life in a much more sort of layered, empathetic way. which is not quite the sort of linearness of a career. And parenthood is full of unpredictability. We lose control. There's empathy, as in lack of control because our kids don't do anything that we want them to do. There's much more empathy, resilience in that. So we've got these real two different kind of worlds going on. And as we head back to work, I think what happens, it's the sort of almost the first moment quite often when we as mums realize that our identity has shifted. Up until that point, we've been really sort of engaged and focused on our new baby, rightly so. But now we've got to get our focus and our kind of mind into this other world, which we've kind of part forgotten about, actually, because it's so different. And with that, we find ourselves feeling a little bit split, because on the one hand, we want to be over there, but the other hand, we want to be in our new world, and it's kind of a bit confusing. I think the other thing is that we are, and I am talking from a sort of Western UK standpoint. So I'm conscious that some of this may or may not feel exactly right for you, but I do feel like, certainly in the UK, we're expected to slot into a system that's actually not designed for parents. People with a full-time caregiving role. Our workplaces just are not set up for us at all. And as a result of that, I think that every time we make a choice about work or about our family, somebody, whether it's us, our partner, our family, our colleague, our manager, somebody kind of gets sort of shortchanged, because we just don't have everything that we need to enable us to do what we need. The world is not just set up for that at the minute. So sometimes women have shared with me that I just wish I had my odd life back, because it's easier, it's more straightforward. But yeah, so I think the emotional friction, the collision is there because it's real, and we're essentially trying to squeeze this expanded sense of self into a pretty linear system that is not designed for us. So yeah, at the root of it, it's
Yes, that
emotional.
is the root cause. Yeah, true.
Yeah. So
But
yeah.
I don't know whether it will shift in the near future. I do remember reading an article where, the whole design of schooling, for that matter, was designed for the times when women were in caregiving roles at home, but it has not evolved to meet caregiving roles plus women getting out of household, which is the norm now.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the challenges. Also, I mean, my kids are at school age now; they're 5 and 7, and the two worlds are totally colliding. School rhythm in the UK and work rhythms are they're poles apart, and yet most of us just trying to work. So yeah, and we've got a long way to evolve to make it easier for everybody, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And the economic impact of, women prioritizing the family life, yet still working, and because of that, not necessarily taking up bigger responsibilities, that also has a snowball effect on the financial and economic future of women.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So coming back to, our whole topic about thriving, look, at the end of the day, we can't go about changing the system. And there is an element of doubt when women come back to work as to whether I'm going to fit in, because you rightly said that you forget. And it's not because you want to forget, it's because now that you have a baby, the overwhelm of the additional responsibility that comes with being a new mother, being a new parent is exorbitant. So it goes to the back of their mind. But when they come back to work, uh, they feel like, oh, now I'm back at work. I should be glad to be back. But instead, they feel like uh, they're not quite themselves at work. And I understand that this is also identity shifting, but it's very common. And knowing this is still not helpful. So, how do you suggest this can be mitigated?
I mean, I think you're right. I think it's a great question. And I think it's important just to at first for us to acknowledge that it to some degree it does go back to what we were just saying, you know, that we have grown and we've changed, and yet our workplace mirrors and expects the previous version of ourselves. So to some degree, I think, in fact, to a large degree, I think it's acknowledging some of this, because I don't think we always do. And if we can acknowledge it and accept it, we can then begin to think about how we can perhaps create an environment which is going to be more helpful to ourselves. I think it's also really challenging because, you know, society and culture can often tell us that we should be grateful, especially now that certainly here in the UK, there's this real sense of, oh, we can have it all now. Aren't you lucky? You can have it all now. And you know, to some degree, that's really challenging. You know, we're getting this messaging telling us, we should be grateful to have our job, and we should be grateful to have a baby as well, and we should be grateful that we've had all this wonderful leave and all of these things. But the reality is, it, I think what actually happens in that is that it causes many of us to almost silence actually what the real struggle is that's going on. And you know, I think so again, there's this acknowledgement piece that we need to, you know, I know so many of us can doom scroll Instagram and see these perfect pictures of you know, the perfect families doing everything going smoothly, but the reality is it's just not like that for any
Right.
of us, frankly, really
So,
not. Even if you've got all the help in the world, it's just not that straightforward. So
brilliant.
I think actually at the heart of it is acknowledging it. And I think the other piece that I would really invite people to acknowledge is that when we are going back to work, and we don't necessarily, you know, we're feeling like we should be grateful, we don't really feel like we're quite ourselves, is that for me just remembering that now we have a load of extra work to do. You know, we've got it's extra and often invisible. You know, we've got the emotional logistics, we've got childcare to sort out, we've still got a household to run, we've got a million things on our to-do list. And even in the most equal kind of parenting families, you know, statistics show that women are still taking the brunt of that, they're still doing more stuff. So at large part, I think that, you know, it is acknowledging us, but
Mhm.
also in acknowledging everything that, you know, the truth behind it, not what we're being told, but the truth behind it about what's going on. And I think to some degree um, there's a sort of, it's not that we're not quite ourselves, because I think it's actually that perhaps we're not being seen. So, you know, we talked earlier about this expanded sense of self, and I think often, you know, when we go back to work, it's that we're not seen. And I think we'll probably talk about a little bit about this in shortly, but you know, how can you make yourself seen and heard and understood, you know? And obviously that's not all on you, because we want people to respond to us, but there are things that are in our control and our power, where, you know, we can help ourselves, I think, in this situation, and you know, just giving ourselves a break, that we don't, yeah, it just keep reminding ourselves and acknowledging that the two worlds aren't fitting nicely together, actually. Yeah.
True. Now, on the note of where you said, to make ourselves seen and heard,
Mm.
and and it's important because sometimes people who work along with us, they see us as, oh, you come back to work, but they don't see that you're not the same person.
Mm.
So, and it's not like it's easy for a woman to say, I'm a mother now, and you need to treat me differently. So how do you help women reframe, one, what success looks like, and two, what are some practical ways that when women come back to work, they can confidently communicate? So maybe you can answer this in two parts. What would new success metrics look like, and then maybe how to inform peers, managers on their new needs.
Yeah. Um, So I think I like to almost think of it almost as, you know, often when we feel like success, we might be kind of lowering the bar. And I think that what can be helpful is that we're not necessarily lowering any bar in terms of our career ambitions and our professional success and so on and so forth. Rather, we're sort of noticing and changing what that bar is measuring. So that sense of actually we're not doing something, we're just shifting how we are doing it. So I think before motherhood, what I just like to remind people of is that before motherhood, it's really not uncommon for us to view success. Sorry, I can hear my dog barking, which is really annoying.
I can't
I'm
hear, so we're all good.
feeling, I'm feeling slightly distracted by that. Anyway, I will embrace her bark.
Yes, please. And
She's
bring her in the screen
very
as well,
good.
if you like.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking is, you know, so often what I talk about with mums is that you know, before we become mums, it's really not uncommon for us to view our success in terms of sort of our professional identity and climbing the corporate ladder. That's kind of it's a traditional kind of sense that we've all come to kind of become quite used to, and it often looks like you know, being visible in the office, working long hours, chasing promotions and job titles, and so on and so forth. You know, that is not uncommon for many of us. Um, but it's not the only option. And I think what is so beautiful in becoming a mum is that it presents an opportunity for us to pause and actually to acknowledge that actually that isn't the only route to success. There are many other ways. And you see this with many mothers actually, you know, becoming self-employed, for example, because they suddenly realize actually I'm this really capable, strong woman, and I don't need to be chasing that way. I can chase this way or whatever it may be. So I think that it's what I like to really do is just invite people to pause and to notice actually what does matter to them, what are their strengths and skills, and kind of give them permission to imagine their own success, which is not a success that's been defined by society or culture or anything like that. So, really getting people to sit quietly and really thinking about, okay, yeah, what does matter to me, not my husband or my partner or my mum or my dad or my colleagues. What is success to me? What matters to me? And then just getting people really to think about, you know, what gives me energy, what brings me joy, what are the things that I do with real ease, you know, what are the strengths and skills that I have, and then how can I sort of shape those into a picture of success that is going to really support me kind of in I suppose this season of life. You know, we're in a season of life as we become mothers and new mothers, and I can tell you already that in the 7 years I've had children, that shifts very quickly. The phases are shifting all of the time. So I think really about kind of inviting you to look within about what really matters to you and not apologizing for that, just really trying to tune into it and then spending time really thinking about, okay, so what does that mean for me, for my success, and so on and so forth. So for me, as an example, I was that classic climb the corporate ladder person, 100%. I was chasing job titles, I was chasing, you know, getting onto the executive leadership team, you know, I was chasing all of that and I ticked it all off. But certainly when I became a mum, I suddenly realized that actually success for me was about making sure that I was really there with my children. And that actually I didn't need as much money as I thought I needed. I wanted enough money to be able to, you know, ideally take them on holiday once a year, so we could just have some time that was just us. You know, so there's these different kind of measures of success, and I mean, the world is your oyster, really. You can have any measure of success you want, but I think remembering that it's your success and you get to choose it, and that over time it will shift and change, and that's all okay. And yeah, as long as it's your success, then it's going to feel good as well. Yeah.
That's so beautiful, Alice. And I was thinking about how I introduced you and how spot on it was. with that. I'm saying you're the only one who says that how you come back with soul so you can really take the time to see what does success look like for me and does it align with my energy, my values. So that's beautiful. So now coming back to the second question, now that women will start thinking about what is success for me,
Mhm.
then how did they go about communicating? Like what approach should they take? Are there any sentences? Because sometimes you know that you want to have the conversation, but you just don't have the words. Can you help with that while I
Yeah,
switch my light on?
yeah.
Mhm.
And I think this is a really, really important thing. And for me, communication is absolutely at the heart of our success, actually, and how well we return and so on and so forth. And I think it always comes up whenever I work with women. And I think part of it stems from the fact that many of us actually find it really hard to ask for what we need and what we want, even if it's from our partners or, let alone our managers and so on and so forth. So, I think acknowledging that it's hard and that many of us find it hard. I mean, my goodness, this was extremely difficult for me. I was better the second child, but the first child I didn't ask for any help and I paid for it. So, I think it's also really helpful to remember that people really love helping us. Actually, there's this kind of reciprocal effect of kindness and compassion, which, if I offer you help, we get a lot back from that. And people really want to do it. So I think the first thing is to say don't be afraid to communicate because it's really important, however hard it might be, and actually the more we do it, the easier it becomes. When it comes to um, communicating with our managers and so on and so forth, I think there's kind of different parts. So I think before any sort of conversation, you've really got to get clear, really crystal clear about what it is you need and what you want. For you, for your family, for your professional success, all of those. And then get really honest with yourself about what is possible within the realms of your life and your support network, but also the what's expected of you in your job role, especially if you're going back to a job that you are familiar with. You've really got to be honest with yourself about, okay, I want, let's say, flexible working is a common request. I want to work 3 days a week, for example, or I want to work reduced hours. Really getting honest with yourself about, okay, this is what I want from a personal perspective, but actually I've got a job to deliver over here. How is it really feasible for me to do 3 days? If it's not, how could I make it feasible? And really just think through about all the possible sort of objections, I guess, that your organization or your manager or anyone else might come up with. And if it helps, get a friend to ask you all the difficult questions, or, if you've got the opportunity, you could speak to a professional, whatever. But just really churn through some of the difficult questions that, the worst possible manager who really doesn't want you to get what you want is going to ask you. And just make sure you've thought through all of that so you're crystal clear about what it is that you might need and want. So that is the first thing. And the bit that most women that I work with forget to do is to link it back to what the organization needs. Because at the end of the day, they've got to run a business. And it's fine that we've got families, but they've also got to deliver for their clients and whoever
And they
else.
have
So I
so
think
many other families also.
precisely. So I think there is this that we've got to think about. And then so that preparation piece, I think, is really, really critical, and can feel hard, but it's really important. I think when it comes to the conversation, I think it's really about really connecting equally. So quite often I see this sort of subordinate manager dynamic where we feel like we're asking for something and that we're being asked for we're asking a favor or something like that. No, we are talking adult to adult. We are equal. I'm entitled to ask for what I want from you, and you are entitled to ask back from me. It's a conversation. To some level it can be a bit of a negotiation, but really sort of going in with that, no, adult to adult, we are equal here. I'm not asking for anything particularly special. And then, when you go into the conversation, with that being said, making sure that you're listening to any concerns they've got and then respond to them. And actually, if you need to go away and think about it and come back, then do that. I think that's all absolutely fine. That's the adult to adult piece. In terms of phrases and so on and so forth, I mean, is that all making some sense so far? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in terms of, and I think the other thing to say is don't go in with any expectations that what you want you're going to get. You can have dreams, absolutely, but the more prepared we are and the more we've thought about any objections, the more likely we get what we want anyway. But so in terms of some phrases and things like that, so you can position it as to deliver my best, which is what the organization wants. What I need right now is. So this goes back to what I was saying earlier. As we go through the different phases of our childhood, we will need different things. And I think when we first return to work, actually, we need much more support. We have much less capacity to perform in the way that we used to. But I already know that now my children are at school, I've got more capacity. I am less sleep deprived. My children are sleeping now where they weren't sleeping before. There's far less illnesses and so on and so forth. So I think there's just acknowledging that, what I need right now is. And this may change, and let's have a conversation about that at that point. So kind of just having that premise and that idea that this isn't forever, that this is a moment in time where I need it. So to deliver at my best, what I need right now is can be a helpful one. You can also say, I want to set myself up to succeed. To do that, can we prioritize this and this week? And I'm like, whatever. Or how can we prioritize? How can we make this work for both of us? Because I want to deliver for you. But, to ensure I succeed, I know I need to be at home at 5 o'clock to, put my child to bed or whatever it may be. But also, thinking, I don't know how familiar anyone is. So something I would that I have come to really love is non-violent communication. I don't know if you've heard of that, Tribly. I'm sure you probably have.
India
But for
got
those,
independence based on nonviolence.
yeah. So for anyone who wants to look it up, it's just this idea where we quite often attach an evaluation or a judgment to an observation. So if we just say, I am noticing that this is happening, it is making me feel like this, and I need this. So I'm noticing, I'm feeling, I need, because it takes
Beautiful.
it off you. And what that stops is any sort of defensiveness. As soon as we put it on the other, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're not giving me this. There's defensiveness, there's a kind of friction, and people don't want to help you. But if you're saying, this is me and this is what I need, people are much more, you're welcoming people in to kind of collaborate and support. So I think that can also be really, 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 really helpful. So yeah, so in summary, get really clear about what you need. Make sure that you've thought about the organization's point of view too, because that's going to be really critical. Connect equally, adult to adult. Um, and then I guess, yeah, if it was just one thing I would invite you to kind of think about as you're preparing a conversation is I notice, I feel, I need, kind of that sort of rhythm. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And just going through that process of approaching the conversation, when you actually approach the conversation or when you're having that conversation, you're so much more confident and open because you're
Yes.
prepared rather than uncertain and
Yeah.
afraid or doubtful.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Preparation is key. Yeah. And
Thank you.
again,
Thank you.
get a friend to help you.
Yeah,
You don't
that's also a
do
great
it.
idea. Role play the whole thing.
Yeah. Or a colleague,
Mm,
who you might be connected with. Lots of women I work with, there's a network of women that they know, or a colleague that who's familiar with your organization, because I think that's the other thing to say is that, you know, any coach, friend, family member is able to help you to a degree and give you the thinking space, but what they don't know are the sort of the nuances of and the workings of the organization and what is possible and what's not possible. So if there is perhaps another parent who has already been through this transition that you're friendly
mm,
with or perhaps if there's a family network within your organization, connecting in with some people in there can be really helpful, just to help you navigate, sort of, get clear on your own ideas first, but then you can kind of use the experience of people who have gone before you to really navigate the sort of particulars of your organization. Yeah.
Yes, that's very valid point. Somebody who's been there and maybe enjoyed those accommodation from
Yeah.
the organization, so they can say this is what worked for me.
Mm, mm, mm.
So Alice, I know you have an exercise for the people
Mhm.
who are attending, and
Yeah.
I'm glad you had a sip of water because I know you've been talking. Um, so are you ready? Should we have the exercise?
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing is just if anyone had any questions on what we've talked about so far, is it worth us checking in that before, just in case there's any burning questions that people might have, and then we can go.
I don't have anything in the chat as yet. Somebody has said to increase your volume. I can hear you clearly, but
Oh,
I think someone's unable to hear you clearly.
yeah.
I think we should be okay on that.
Okay.
All right, no questions in the chat. Okay, we have a question.
Mhm.
Aisha, you can go ahead.
Okay, yeah, hi. So I can say it, right? I do not need to type in the chat, right?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So, what I wanted to know is in a part, Alice has mentioned about the emotional logistics, right? Like after you come back from your maternity leave. And in the same part, you had also mentioned, Triply, about, realizing that you are not the same person anymore, like the before and after version, there is a dramatic change, right? So my question is like, how do you get others on board with this emotional turmoil that you are going on? Like, you want to be there for your child, you want to be there for your family, but you also want to be there for your work. Like, this is the battle that's going inside you, but how do you make others also understand that this is something that you need time to adapt to? So what would you suggest, like some tips or maybe some ways by which this thing can get a little lighter?
Mm.
Yeah, that's my question to Alice.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a really, really great question. So, and it's something that I talk a lot about with the women I work with. I think the thing that comes for me is probably spending some time either on your own or with someone else, really thinking about how you can tell that story with ease and comfort. Because it is emotional and it is difficult. Um, but what I know is that if we don't share that with people, then they're none the
Hmm.
wiser. So they're not
Hmm.
in a position to help you. So
Yeah.
in many ways, I think if you're able to, and it doesn't need to be a long story, but it could be just a couple of sentences that you feel comfortable to share with whoever it may be about what's going on for you, and what that
Okay.
means for you, um, and also what it doesn't mean. So I think something that often gets mixed up is that, and this is the emotional collision again, is that, you know, organizations and people even with children, they have this perception that, oh, if they're a mother, they no longer care about that career. And I think there is, so
Correct.
that's, so, you know, rather, so, and I think we need to, we actually, we can stand up for that and say, you know, this is everything that's going on for me. My identity has changed. I now have
Hmm.
a dependent person over here, who I care deeply for. Um, and at the same time, I care deeply for my career. I have, you know, put my heart and soul into it. I have these are all the successes I've had, and I want to continue that or not, depending on what your story is. But I think
Okay.
having having a story that feels really comfortable for you, um,
Hmm.
that expresses what it is. And I think this idea of it's a moment in time, because how you might be feeling now, I I feel pretty certain that that will shift in time, in my
Okay, yeah.
experience. And I think that especially when you're going back into an organization, you know, again, for you yourself, acknowledging your strengths, your skills, the
Hmm.
value you add, you can more
Hmm.
confidently go in and back into the organization. And even with a sense of you know that identity shift and the emotion that's going on in it, I think you just somehow get a bit more confident if you have reconnected yourself with the value that you
Hmm.
bring to the organization, because then that doubt is
Okay.
away. Is that making some?
Okay.
Does
Yeah,
does
yeah,
that?
it definitely it's definitely it's I like basically the like you have to get your plan across to the other people also, right? Like you want to be connected, you have to make them understand also that yes, you very much are in for that. I guess
Yeah,
that's what you're saying, right? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, and I think the reality is that we are emotional beings. We do connect to
Exactly.
human
Exactly.
emotion, and I think that
Exactly.
sometimes we are so afraid of emotion in the workplace. And it yeah, in an ideal world, and this is why the preparation of a story is important, because actually
Hmm.
none of us particularly want to be very emotional at work. That doesn't necessarily,
Exactly.
but there is no harm
Exactly.
in having a story that shares some of the emotion, that enables another
Hmm.
human to connect with you and to bring them to where you are, with and that doesn't, and then it doesn't diminish where you are at all, but can just actually support you in some way. Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
we have to communicate, because otherwise no one knows, and then they can't support and they can't connect. Yeah.
Correct, correct, correct. I totally, totally get your point. Thank you so much, Alice, for making it a little more clearer. Thank you. Yeah.
Alice, we have two more questions. So we have Chaitali who has asked, it happens often that people make some statements which are not very sensitive in nature. And, when you're a new mother, it hurts a lot.
Mm.
So how do you suggest to navigate this aspect, and how you sort of help your inner self to focus on what is needed for inner peace?
I mean, it's such a beautiful question. Um, I'm fearful of sounding like a little bit of a broken record, but I think that again there is, so it's funny because in my program, I have an online program. I don't want to do any sales stuff, but because this
That's
is so
fine.
important, this is your point is, I can't remember who it was that said it. Was it Shantru? Did you?
Chaitali, Chaitali.
Shatali. Shatali, this there's so many things, like, when are you going to have another baby? Did you have a nice holiday? There's so many of them, so many of them. So much so that in my program I decided to do a mini podcast um in each module to cover all of them, because people are so ridiculous. Anyway, so the broken record piece is, do what you can, and if perhaps it's even asking AI, what are all the microaggression things that people say that might hurt me? Maybe
That's
ask
brilliant.
friends or family who have been through it, what were some of the things that were hard for you to hear? And then hear them before you go back to work and prepare a response for them. So, did you have a nice holiday? Oh, I've not been on holiday. I started a new job and I now have a dependent child, blah, 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 blah. So I think, again, it's this confidence to know that, because often when we go back to work, we're leaving our children for the first time, and that can feel hard. We're very often so sleep deprived still, amongst other things. So acknowledging that our emotions are up here anyway. But again, if we've got a few sort of quick snippets of kind of response that we can give back. When are you going to have another child? Who says I'm going to have another child? So sort of challenging back if you feel comfortable to. I think it's also perfectly okay to say, I'm not going to qualify that question with a response. I'm not going to, so there's that sense of it's such a ridiculous question that you're asking me that I'm going to shut it down because it doesn't even deserve my attention. So depending on how bold you're feeling, which most of us don't, but as we get a bit more confident, we might. So I think it's about preparing. So thinking about what some of those questions are, and then just preparing some sort of stock responses. And actually, one of the stock responses that feels really comfortable for you and will flow easily off your tongue is, is the shutting down response that actually says, I don't need to answer that question. I'm not going to. So
That's the best advice I have heard.
And then, have a and then. What have you been? And kind of almost like push it back to them. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. That is amazing advice. And yeah, that is responsive indeed. Thanks, Alice. Now, Tanu has asked a question. Now, do you want to take that question now, or should we wait for more questions and answer them after the activity?
Should we do? I don't mind. Whatever you prefer. Yeah, because we're a bit short on time, aren't we? So shall I? Whatever you prefer.
Let's do the activity because I think they'll feel more confident. And then,
Okay.
if there are more questions, then, but we'll definitely stop at in another 18 minutes because I'm conscious people have other things to do as well.
No worries. So I just want to invite everyone to get a pen and paper if they can, and if not, you can just visualize this. That's fine. But what I thought might be, there's a million exercises I could have done, but I think this identity piece is quite important for us to acknowledge, and is often where I kind of often start with people. So what I want to do is just invite you to explore your new identity. And as I said earlier, that returning to work often feels like a collision between who we were before maternity leave and who we are now. So I'm just going to guide you through a short reflection that honors both of those selves and just helps you to sort of notice some of your strengths and value that you can kind of carry forward and perhaps integrate. So the first part, just like you just to maybe just sit and close your eyes if that feels comfortable to you, but just take a moment now to think back to yourself before you became a mother. So thinking about before you became a mother, and just think about, what did you value then? What mattered to you then? What were your strengths or qualities that made you really brilliant at work? And just take a couple of minutes now to jot down a few words or phrases. There's no right answers here. This is about you. And I really want to invite you to tune into yourself. So before you became a mum, what were the strengths and skills you were perhaps most proud of, that gave you the most energy? What was really important to you then? I'm just going to give you a minute. If you're feeling stuck, you can perhaps think of one of the favourite jobs that you had and perhaps what skills or activities you were doing then. Perhaps if you were well known for something at work, what were you known for? In a good way, obviously. So just 20 more seconds and move on. 3, 2, 1. So you've got some sense, hopefully, of just remembering of reconnecting back to before you're a mum. And now I want to think of the person that you are now, this person that has perhaps just returned or that is returning to work. Think about all the skills and experiences that you've had over the past while you've been off on your maternity leave or parental leave. What new priorities, strengths, or values have emerged? What has motherhood taught you that now shapes the way that you might work or lead? And just write those down too. So another 2 minutes to do that. So what has this journey to motherhood shown you about yourself and who you are? What are you proud of now in becoming a mum? 30 more seconds. Three, two, one. And now finally, just like you to reflect on how perhaps these two selves can work together to make you even stronger. And I wonder if there's perhaps just one insight that might stand out for you. And maybe if they don't come together, that's okay too. But what's the one standout thing about who you are now, which can really support you and help you as you head back to work? What is really valuable to the team, to the organization? And as I say, if you can integrate the two of you, even better, but it's no bother if not. Just perhaps acknowledging that key thing that you are now. And if there's more than one, brilliant, but one is also more than enough. And then perhaps once you're ready, if anyone wants to just perhaps pop, if you're up for it, you could share your insight or your word or phrase in the chat, or and we can just see what is available there. And I'm very
I'll put
happy
mine in the chat, Alice, because I really enjoyed this exercise. And even though, my children are now older, it was great to revisit that time as to what it was before I became a mother and what it is now. So I'll give that initiation to people. So I'll talk about that one thing which I feel has really helped me, and I call it foreshadowing, which is, after being a mother and having a child, I started planning as to, okay, how you have to visualize all the dominoes, that if this happens and this happens and this happens, because if you show this, your child will do this, and then this will happen. And that is one key skill which I think I did not have before, or I was more of a long-term thinker. But having a child made me also a short-term thinker with the ability to visualize all the dominoes. And I think that's my key takeaway.
Great. And how valuable is that, right?
I do think it's extremely valuable.
To notice that you can do both, Lovely. I'm wondering if anyone else has got something that they could share or would like to share.
Yeah. If there's anything that anybody wants to put in the chat.
I know for me, the big thing has been resilience. I think I've always been a resilient person, but perhaps didn't necessarily see it in quite the same light.
Mm.
And I can see now just how capable I am of sort of when I get knocked down, kind of bringing myself back up again. Yeah, which is useful when you own your own business.
And I think a common thing which I've heard with other mothers also, patience, because when you don't have dependents and you're the solo person doing all the work, you don't have the patience of waiting for somebody else to finish. And because people are at different competency levels, and the moment you become a mother and you're dealing with a child, um, who's still not entirely capable to do everything, not that a child is not capable at the level that they are at, but that I think patience is also one of the key things which people see that
Yeah,
is something that they can.
yeah,
All right. Uh, I think I will let people dwell on that in that
yeah,
exercise because it is quite an intense exercise in itself as people look at what they write and how they draw a Venn diagram around it and still enjoy the best of both the worlds. We'll come back to the question, Alice, because there are two questions. One is from Tanu, but I'm not sure whether the exercise already answers her question because the question is how to define what's best for you because there is a lot of confusion there. So I do think you've addressed that and this activity would help. Is there anything you want to add to further clarify how to define what's best for you?
No, no, this answered the question. And I think this exercise needs to be done every 2 weeks or a month to keep on getting back to the roots.
I agree with
Oh,
that, Tanu.
yeah, I love that. I think the thing is it is about it. It's extremely hard, and I think sometimes doing it with other people is helpful. But really, there's so much noise. We live with so much noise and expectation, and so on and so forth. But I think just at a base level, if you can think about your values, um, and that is when something is a value, when you feel a bit aggrieved when something happens and it's not like okay, that can be a good way to help identify them. But yeah, your values, just exploring your strengths and skills. So what are you really good at? What is it that brings you the best at work? What's meaningful to you in your work? So what's purposeful? What brings you meaning? Because if you're gonna if if we're going to work and we're leaving our child, which is really hard for most of us, even the most career ambitious people are finding that hard. If we're showing up to work and we're doing something that we care about and that is meaningful, that is going to help. So getting clear on those. And I think being really clear about what support you have at home and what is possible within the realms of that support. And I mean financial support, people, resources, whatever it may be. So I think getting clear on those four things will get you a long way to working out what is actually best for you. Yeah. You're on mute.
Sorry, you alluded to the fact that, we leave our kids at home, which is a good segue into a question which is in the chat that, how to deal with that mom guilt. So Deepshika has asked a question that I want to know how to come out of those regrets when we leave kids at home for work, especially when the child wants you to be with them. Yeah, even with working from home, right? There are instances where your child is coming because they think you're at home, but you're working and you're like shoving them away or, taking them out of their video bombing. So how to manage that, Alice?
It's so hard. It is so hard. And me and many, many women that I've worked with have cried a huge amount during this phase as we deal with that exact kind of, it feels quite painful, doesn't it? And I think there's a sense of grieving and loss that can happen because we're not with them all the time. So I think that I've now totally lost my train of thought. Can you remind me the
Mum
question?
guilt. Mum guilt.
Mum guilt. So, I mean, I think a lot of it goes back to what we've just said about being clear about what matters to you, what's purposeful for you, all of those sorts of things. I also, I think sometimes guilt is a helpful thing. It helps us to question, okay, what is the guilt? Is it actually just a sadness that I want to be with my son, which is perfectly okay? But I think that when we're just checking in about what that guilt is, and is it something I need to act on? And if it is something I need to act on, how can I act on it? And that can help dissipate it a little bit. But again, I think a lot of the guilt comes from the expectations and what we're told, what we should be doing, and all of that sort of stuff, all those judgments. So I think that's why, again, it's quite useful to come back to the heart of who you are and what's important to you. And that way you can hopefully create some space. The other thing that I remember when I was pushing around my firstborn when he was really tiny, and I was listening to a podcast with a lady called Alexandra Sachs. She's a psychotherapist. And I remember really distinctly her talking about how actually, this goes to the point about the child wanting you, that actually it's really, really important for us to create that space, because it's part of their development that they need to learn to live without us. They need to learn, even at that young age. There's another psychotherapist called Erica Comessa. I can never say her name very well. She talks really importantly about the role of the father in sort of at around 18 months, where because the baby is often very attached to the mother, 0 to 18 months, but actually the child needs to learn to become unattached to the mother. So it's actually an important part of their development. So rather than feel guilty about it, we can sometimes ease ourselves by understanding that this is part of their growth and development, actually. And we can do it in a kind, supportive way, and set it up in a kind, supportive way. But actually, this isn't it's not about us leaving them. This is also about us supporting them to grow and develop. So yeah, a few different.
So we have time for one last question. And this is a personal question. And after that, we have an observation, and I'll read that out because it's beautiful. But this is one last question, and we have 2 minutes. As mothers, there's constant push to be everything for everyone. Now, Alice Darbyshire, how do you personally balance caring for your babies, your own children now, they're school going, while also caring for yourself and people around you?
Okay, it's been a huge learning journey, and I feel emotional even saying that. It's been really hard. You know what? It was my mother that said to me one day, she made an observation. She said, "You are holding so tightly, a grip so hard on everything because you want to do everything perfectly, just right, this, that, you don't ask for help, all of this." So it was actually my mum that she held up the mirror to me, and something definitely switched then. And I don't know whether it was because it was hard to hear, but she also gave me some level of permission to ask for what I needed. And I would say that it's everything that I've told you already. I've done all of those things. That's why I put it into a program, because they've helped me. And it's just been keeping on going, trying each time. When I fall off, I try again. And now I am very clear about the things that I need. So I know I need to go to exercise. I go to something called CrossFit. It's like a gym here, but it really helps me. It's my space. Don't think about anything else. I've gone on and off with meditation. That's helped me. Like when I really need space and to create space, meditation. I go on daily dog walks. That is incredible. Being out in nature is the best therapy for me, and it gives me headspace and all of that. And I ask for what I need. And I think there's a real there was another nugget that someone said to me once. I think it was another podcast I think I listened to, was that often it feels hard for us to ask for things and to do things And it's hard for people to receive that because they lose something from us stopping doing our things. So if I stop making, it's really, I don't know if this example is going to land well, but if I stop making the bed, our bed, my husband loses a nice bed to get into. And this is a frivolous, stupid example, but and he might get upset about that. But actually, that's him. That's not me. He's also perfectly able to make the bed. So there's this sort of acknowledgement around how we just really tune into what we need and to ask for that, and to not attach ourselves to other people's responses. There's a great book called Let Them, or the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. Read that. It's excellent. I'll write it in here. Let me get it for you. I've got it here for you. Yeah. The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins.
I have a view on that, because I normally say this: don't make their problem your problem.
Yes.
And
Exactly.
sometimes I have to, like, sometimes I forget, but sometimes I'm like, all right, I'm not making your problem my problem. And that's how I've managed to, but these are lessons like you that have come the hard way. But it is what everyone has to go through the journey. So, Alice, I am going to read out, which is like a testimonial, but I think you should hear it, that before Ruchika, who put this, before she went on her maternity leave, people would term her as someone who is an independent spirit making choices for herself. But after maternity, she's come to realize that she has to slow down, hold space, be patient, and maybe, together, those things she believes has made her understand herself, listen to her voice deeply, while also listening to others. And that was her takeaway from the exercise, which is beautiful.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Oh.
So, Alice, thank you. I know we went 2 minutes overboard, but I could have spoken to you for another 15 minutes, but I'm cognizant it's early in the day for you and you have the rest of the day to get on with. So, thank you. Just to summarize, I think returning to work doesn't mean that you go back to who you were. It means you're expanding, and it's okay to take up the space as the mother and the professional that you're becoming.
Yeah.
Cool.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
All right. So those of you who'd like to reach out to Alice, I will send an email on details on how to connect with Alice. And if there is, if you're looking to strengthen your parenting muscles to become a mindful parent and also raise a confident, independent child, then our Montessori mindful parenting courses can be very helpful. So thank you so much, Alice, for your time. And thank you to all the participants. I hope that you enjoy the session, and I hope you have a good time ahead.
Thanks so much.
Bye, Alice. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.